The air in the Halloween constant was perpetually the color of bruised peach, thick and sticky with the scent of burnt caramel and wet ash. It was a suffocating sweetness that clung to the insides of the throat, an omnipresent reminder that this world, like all worlds stumbled into via the fractured machinery of the omnipresent, was fundamentally rotten. Alara, known to her companions simply as Willow, shivered despite the warmth emanating from the massive hearth at the center of their compound. She held her favored lighter, Bernie, letting the tiny flame dance, an insignificant rebel against the encroaching vastness of the sugary twilight. This was their life now, the bitter comedy of surviving in a land made entirely of dessert. The Gumdrop Garrison, their base, sprawling and absurd, sat defiantly on a patch of ground they had meticulously cleared of the pervasive, sticky vines, the tendrils of the dreaded Laffy Taffy lurkers. They called it the Gumdrop Garrison, though it was less a garrison and more a testament to Wickerbottom's frantic architectural ingenuity driven by persistent low-grade panic. The perimeter was a haphazard, yet robust, wall constructed primarily of petrified gingerbread planks and reinforced with thick slabs of crystalline hard candy, harvested painfully with picks that dulled faster than they could be sharpened. The ground within the walls was paved with flat chunks of chocolate shale, a desperate attempt to keep the constant oozing sugar mud out of their main living spaces. The base was enormous. It had to be. Wolfgang, the candied beetle carapace needs to be sorted. Wickerbottom's voice, raspy from too many inhaled sugar spores, cracked across the compound. She was overseeing the newly constructed library, a towering structure intended to house all her borrowed science books, currently battling a persistent infestation of small, scurrying nougat nymphs. Wolfgang, a mountain of muscle battling a truly enormous peppermint spider, a brittle, unnervingly angular creature whose legs shattered into needle-like shrapnel upon impact, grunted in response. Is sorted, Professor, but the small sticky things keep eating the science paper. Wolfgang thinks we should eat the small sticky things first. Alara ignored the squabble, she was focused on the fuel supply. In this modded hellscape, typical wood burned too quickly and left insufficient heat. They needed crystallized honey log or, better yet, the dense, slow-burning hardwood of the ancient, twisted candy cane trees. She approached the massive fire pit, fed by a mechanism Wolfgang had lovingly dubbed, the Ovens of Might. The flames were no longer mere yellow or red, they shimmered with unsettling hues of blue and violet, the color of burning sucrose and artificial flavoring. The sanity drain is worse tonight, isn't it, Willow? Wilson, the resident scientist who had started this miserable journey, stepped beside her, adjusting his ridiculously thick spectacles. His beard, usually neat, was matted with sticky condensation. Alara nodded, watching the shadows stretch and warp. The air is too sweet. It feels like the night is pushing in earlier. The candy-based nightmares were subtle but pervasive. Unlike the standard shadow creatures, who hunted pure madness, the candy horrors thrived on a specific flavor of dread, the deep psychological nausea of consuming something beautiful yet unnatural. The ground pulsed with the gummy texture of the earth. Even the trees looked delicious, which was horrific. We are running critically low on stone, Wilson murmured, tapping a map marked with desperate scribbles. The rock is too far out. The supply run must happen tomorrow, before the next full moon cycle. The gummy bears. I know, Alara cut him off, her hand instinctively checking her pocket for the small emergency stash of charcoal she kept, a necessary contrast to the cloying sweetness. The gummy abominations are harder to kill during the full sugar tide. They regenerate faster than Wolfgang can chop them. The brittle harvest. The next morning, under the sickly orange canvas of the forever dusk, the expedition team set out. Alara, Wilson, and Wolfgang, armed with obsidian-tipped axes and spears laced with a powerful, fast-acting salt solution, the only thing that seemed to dissolve the sticky carapace of the stronger candy mobs. Their objective lay across the caramel bog, in the relative safety of the barren, high-altitude terrain where actual non-edible minerals might be found. The journey was a trial of patience and hygiene. They navigated fields of brittle, shattered peanut brittle shards that cut their boots, and avoided the deep pools of slow-moving hot fudge sludge where the monstrous caramel crawlers lay in wait, ready to engulf and digest anything that touched them. Wolfgang was the vanguard, his mighty spear clearing paths. This place, it tries too hard to be delicious. He spat, wiping fudge sweat from his brow. Is insulting to food. Alara had to use Bernie constantly, not for light, but to burn away the adhesive traps laid by the invisible sugar silkworms. Every few steps, the air would tighten as the nougat nymphs, small, fast, winged creatures resembling deformed fairies molded from stale marshmallows, darted through the periphery. They didn't attack physically, they simply whispered unsettlingly sweet promises, draining sanity swiftly. Don't you want to rest? This chocolate rock is softer than any bed. Alara focused on the gritty reality of the obsidian spear in her hands, resisting the urge to simply collapse and eat the ground. Finally, they reached the objective, a small oasis of gray, normal rock nestled between two massive, crystallized cotton candy mountains. They worked quickly, the sound of normal stone striking metal a welcome, jarring change from the constant crunch and squelch of the candy biome. As the sun began to truly dip, bathing the Constant in a deep, unsettling lavender. Wilson called the alarm. Incoming. Massive signature, the caramel crawlers, and something else, something large is moving the cotton candy mountains. Alara looked up. The cotton candy mountain, which had seemed inert, was shuddering. A shadow, immense and vaguely ursine, detached itself from the pink mass. It was the main terror of the mod, the great gummy gorger. It stood nearly twice the height of normal trees, a colossal figure molded from shimmering, multicolored fruit gelatin. It moved slowly, each step leaving a crater of melted sugar, but its movements were inexorable. It roared, the sound like tearing wet parchment. Run, Alara screamed, throwing her precious satchel of salt bombs at the encroaching caramel crawlers, dissolving a path for retreat. The gorger didn't give chase, it didn't need to. It simply began to rip hunks of the environment off and consume them, growing slowly larger, slowly denser, an edible, unstoppable tidal wave aimed directly at the Gumdrop garrison. The siege of the sugar swarm. They made it back to the base under the cover of a genuinely frantic sprint, throwing the last of their rock into the storehouse just as the first wave of low-tier nightmares reached the perimeter. Wickerbottom was ready. She had armed the gingerbread launchers, catapults designed to hurl sharp, rock-hard candies at high velocity. Target the peppermint spiders. Aim for the joints, she commanded, her face grim. The night was pure, clashing chaos. The perimeter, usually a comforting boundary, now felt like a desperate final stand. Alara and Wolfgang stood at the main gate, where the candy wall was already melting slightly under the acid sweat of the caramel crawlers. Wolfgang wielded his spear like a whirlwind, shattering the brittle forms of the spiders. They are too many, Willow. Wolfgang yelled, his face slick with exhaustion and sticky goo. They reform faster than I kill them. The primary threat was the sheer volume, coupled with the psychological warfare of the nougat nymphs, who were now swarming over the rooftops, their sweet, deceitful murmurs drilling into everyone's minds. Alara grabbed the bucket of pitch, a mix of tar and highly concentrated honey log resin, that Wilson had formulated. This was the risky move. Wilson, light the traps now, and Professor, fire on my signal. She scaled the inner wall, ignoring the frantic crunch of the sticky creatures below. Bernie's flame was steady in her hand. She drenched the outer base of the wall with the pitch, creating a moat of high-octane fuel. Now, Wilson touched a flaming brand to the pitch. The entire perimeter erupted in a furious, hungry blue flame. The sugar, meeting the sudden heat, didn't burn so much as it caramelized instantly, turning the advancing crawlers into molten puddles of black goo. The spiders simply dissolved in the inferno. But the fire was drawing something bigger. The great gummy gorger arrived moments later, crashing through the outer layer of the cotton candy forest like a bulldozer made of jello. It saw the fire, saw the light, and lumbered toward the base, its massive, gelatinous limbs soaking up the blue flames without apparent damage. Its bulk alone threatened to flatten the garrison. Wickerbottom, the specialized ammunition, Alara screamed. Wickerbottom's response was immediate. The gingerbread launchers swiveled down, and instead of hard candies, they began firing barrels of concentrated, refined flour, the only non-sweet substance they could gather in bulk. The flour was sticky and dense, designed to coat the creature and disrupt its sugar-based regeneration. But it was Wolfgang's turn for the killing blow. He sprinted out of the gates and, with a terrifying, primal roar, began hacking at the gorger's massive feet, coated now by a layer of non-edible flour. The gorger lowered its colossal head, distracted by the minuscule annoyance. Alara didn't hesitate. She threw 3 fire bombs in rapid succession, high-explosive mixtures fortified with gunpowder and dried pepper flakes, another desperate sanity ingredient. The fire bomb struck the gorger's coated face. The intense heat, combined with the dry flour, didn't burn the creature, it caused a catastrophic, volatile reaction. The gorger burst, not into flame, but into a cloud of scalding, superheated steam and molten fruit flavoring. The remaining hordes hesitated, covered in sticky residue, their sugar-fueled hierarchy suddenly headless. Alara, hair singed and lungs burning, looked out over the carnage. The siege was broken, the sweet taste of exhaustion. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the crackle of the dying perimeter fire and the low, exhausted panting of the survivors. They spent the next 3 hours clearing the field of battle. The remains of the gummy gorger provided them with a new, rare resource, hardened gelatin armor, strangely resilient, though requiring constant cleaning. As the pre-dawn glow of the Constant began to rise, painting the sky in violent shades of candied orange and plum, Alara sat beside the fire pit, watching the final wisps of the blue flame disappear. Wilson approached, offering her a ration of dried berries, a rare, precious counterpoint to the sweetness. "We held it," he said simply, his voice flat with fatigue. The Gumdrop garrison survived. Alara took the berries, savoring the tartness. She looked around their sprawling, messy, yet stubbornly intact base. The gingerbread walls held. The chocolate-tiled floor was sticky but whole. They had built their haven from the very nightmares that sought to consume them, and for tonight, they had won. But the scent of burnt caramel lingered, an insidious promise on the wind. Survival in the Constant was not a victory, it was merely a postponement. Tomorrow, they would have to repair the northern wall, restock the salt, and somehow, find a way to clear the sticky residue left by the siege. And they would need to expand. They always had to expand, for the Constant was never satisfied with simple survival, it demanded perpetual, desperate growth, preparing for the next, inevitably sweeter, and far more terrible night.